Hello, this is the RPG Crawler, and welcome to another Indie Game Friday, where each week I take a look at a different computer-independent role-playing game. This week I'm taking a look at another relatively new release, at least new as of this recording, Sin Slayers. Developed by Goonswarm and published by Black Tower Entertainment, Sin Slayers was released on Steam on September 5th, 2019. Sin Slayers is a dark fantasy RPG with roguelike elements involving running a team of heroes through the Valley of Sin with the intent of taking on the 7 Sin Lords. Along the way, you explore regions, uncover events and encounters, build your characters up, as well as meet NPCs and build up the old church, your home base. The plot is introduced through an illustrated cutscene, which basically tells the tale of a noble warrior that gets lost in the woods, only to find a group of people involved in battle. After facing off their enemies, they are chased off by more of them into an old church, where they find other adventurers waiting for them. An old blind sage there greets them and essentially tells them they can't leave until they deal with the 7 Sin Lords and unseal the 7 seals. Gameplay consists of 3 main segments, although there are several subsystems that are available for most of these segments. The first is the Old Church, where you manage party members and obtain main quests. It consists of a semi-scrollable screen with the party represented near a table and further NPCs to the right. To the left, inactive party members may be seen when you acquire them, which may be substituted out into your main slots at will. NPCs you have unlocked are available on the right side of the screen and may have dialogue when clicked on other quests or offer access to crafting. In the middle of the screen, there is a main door, which you may exit onto the world map to select which sections of the world to venture to, as well as crystals representing the status of the 7 Sin Lords. Along the top of the screen are icons where you can learn information on the unlocked Sin Lords. The other 2 major portions of the game are accessed after you select a portion of the world to venture into. I'm not going to consider the main map a main section of the game, because you spend so very little time on it. There are 7 sections of the game: the Forest of Gluttony, the Graveyard of Sloth, the Village of Envy, the Caves of Greed, the Ruins of Lust, the Castle of Wrath, and the Citadel of Pride. Each one represents an area ruled over by a particular Sin Lord and may be accessed once unlocked in the storyline. Entering an area gives a choice of areas to go after, usually a mini-boss and then the main boss. Each one opens up a map with random encounters sprinkled upon it. And thus is the second major portion of the game, the exploration section. The party is represented by a single character on a tile-based map. The majority of the map is shrouded in a fog of war. Along the top, the interface describes the area that you're in, your sin rating, as well as sin effects. The Curse of the Sin Lord may cause your character to accrue more sin while doing certain actions, and reaching certain levels of sin may result in changes to how many resources you receive in battle, as well as the difficulty of the boss of the area. The more sin you accrue, the more resources you acquire, but the more difficult the area becomes. Oddly enough, many of the ways that you actually gain sin through encounters also leads to more resources, so in a way it's often more profitable to let your sin accrue, despite the potential consequences. You may also see your party along the bottom, along with the inventory icon and the map icon. Above each character's portrait is an exploration skill icon, depending on that character's class. This can range from the cleric's group heal to the warrior's scouting and so forth. Anytime an exploration skill is activated, it is then inaccessible for a certain countdown. This countdown decreases when you explore a square currently covered by a fog of war. The exploration mode thus just has your party traveling from tile to tile, uncovering the fog of war. There are set encounters randomly scattered about the map, but their positions are fixed once generated, useful to consider when you've marked some out with a skill such as scouting. These encounters can cover a variety of options. Some are either beneficial or obviously neutral. Fountains allow you to rest and regain health, portals may sweep you to another area of the map, and altars can give you a temporary blessing or allow you to pray to reduce your accrued sin. Other encounters may lead directly to combat. You're given the list of enemies that you will be facing, although how many of their details are known will depend on how many of that enemy you've actually defeated in the past. If you step onto a square that contains the boss, you may be given the option to retreat, and if you have the Huntress in your squad, her special ability may allow you to avoid any sort of battle immediately if it's not currently on refresh. Some encounters are just traps, which may be disarmed if you have the disarm kit, otherwise must be interacted with, which damages your group and often put lingering damage effects on your party that count down over time. Some are merely treasure chests, some of which may be locked, requiring a key to loot. Be careful, however, for chests may often be mimics, triggering a battle with a mimic once opened. The majority of other encounters may go either way. Things like abandoned crypt doors, dead bodies, uncovered graves, and so forth may give you the option to investigate them or leave them alone. Generally, investigating them accrues sin, and the effects are a bit random. You can uncover a treasure, a trap, or an enemy group. Some encounters also unlock quests. There's two types of quests, main ones that advance the story and unlock functionality within the main church, and these are sustained even when you leave the map and may be completed over time. There's also minor quests, which generally offer a quick reward but must be completed on the same map, going away when you leave the area for any reason. The final of the three main sections of the game is combat. Combat is turn-based and opens up the combat screen. The combat screen generally has the party on the left-hand side, enemies on the right-hand side, and character statistics listed in the appropriate sides. At the top of the screen is the turn bar, with characters and enemies listed in order of initiative. This is dictated by a character's speed. Along the bottom is the skill bar. As characters unlock skills, these may be added to this bar. Characters and enemies both have three main resources to use in combat: armor, health, and rage. Armor is a flat total that is refreshed at the start of each combat and represents a character's defensive abilities. It's usually reduced before health, but some attacks may either partially or fully ignore it and go direct to health. Health is exactly what it sounds like. When it reaches 0, the character dies. Finally, there is a rage. Rage starts at 0 and is increased by character actions. Advanced skills may require rage to use, and thus cannot be initially used until a sufficient amount of rage has been accrued. During each character's turn, they may pass or use a skill. Once a skill is selected, characters then select a target and then execute their attacks or skills. It's relatively simple all in all, and combat simply proceeds along the order of initiative until the party either wins or dies. One thing that I should note is that most battlefields also have highlightable objects that may be clicked on. These may contain resources, although many may well be empty. Doing this does not actually take a turn, so it can be well worth it to scour a combat area for resources when you can. After combat, you're presented with the combat summary. This lists the experience earned as well as any rewards you earned. You can also look through the battle stats, which lists a summary of combat numbers such as damage done, items used, and so forth. Aside from these three main pillars of gameplay, at any time the inventory icon can be selected to open up a whole slew of new menus. First is the party screen, which shows the amount of experience needed and the stats for each character. Characters have a number of passive stats this way, including hit points, armor, power, speed, evasion, and crit percentage. You can also adjust the formation of the party here. Next is the inventory, where you can adjust which character has what equipped, as well as review the things that you found on your travels. The vast bulk of these are likely going to be crafting items. Characters may equip 2 general items, a weapon and an accessory, each of which may adjust the character's base stats or physical damage, and many accessories are character class dependent. You may also select a battle loadout of consumable items, which can be used during combat by clicking the inventory. After the inventory is the ability tree, where the character's abilities may be selected. Each tier may have a couple of different alternate abilities, and each tier may be unlocked using Stones of Knowledge. Each tier must be unlocked before the next one becomes available, so you can't just skip all the way to tier 5. Crafting allows you to use all of the various things that you found to create potions, weapons, armor, artifacts, and miscellaneous items, usually food or other utility objects. Crafting in the field may well be more limited than crafting in the old church, where you have access to things like the blacksmith. You may also have the recipe to craft something, some of which may be uncovered during your travels. The Quest tab is next and simply displays a list of quests, both current and completed, as well as the requirements for each one. The Bestiary tab follows, and here you find information on each of the heroes as you unlock them, as well as monsters, bosses, and sin lords as you encounter them. Monsters, bosses, and sin lords may be listed with unknown abilities in their entries even after you've defeated them before, although the more of a creature you kill, the more information you actually learn about them. The Tome tab basically just shows what background lore you've uncovered and simply allows you to reread the contents of the books that you find. Finally, there's the Achievement tab, which is, the in-game achievements that you can aim for. So that's the basic gist of the game, and I have to pause here and give my thoughts on it, despite not covering the main so-called draw of the game, and the reason should become clear enough. The main so-called draw of the game is that once a particular game is completed, your current characters become the bosses of the next run, supposedly. Now, I didn't get to that, but more on that in a sec. In terms of graphics, Sin Slayers uses a pixelated art style that still manages to have enough detail and animation to be worthy of praise. It does, however, have a sort of mobile app UI that can grate on some people. The music is a sort of set of rock tracks suitable for the theme and the setting, although they can be a little bit repetitive. The combat is solid, but again can be repetitive. It's usually just challenging enough to require one to pay attention to it, but unfortunately rather hard to actually begin to fail at with anything approaching a balanced party as long as you're giving at least a token effort. The variety of enemies can make each combat feel a little bit unique, although not completely unique, and the exploration phase can have some strategic elements to it, at least if you're using your non-combat abilities like skills for scouting and such correctly, allowing you to select which encounters to engage in and potentially allow skills to refresh by purposefully exploring empty squares just to cause their refresh to increment. The crafting system can be quite interesting as well, to a point. It gives a purpose behind gathering all of these resources during each combat, an incentive to potentially build up your sin by poking around in encounters that you might otherwise just skip. My main problem with Sin Slayers is, well, one of repetition and filler, and it's one problem that's kind of split over all of the systems. All of them kind of suffer from it to a certain degree. I actually enjoyed what of the game I played, but even after I allotted fully twice as long as I usually do for my Indie Game Friday review series, I still didn't get to see all of the systems that I wanted to see in it simply because play is so drawn out with busy work. Time sinks that you'd normally associate with a mobile clicker game or an MMO are here in full force, and drag out gameplay a little bit longer than one might find comfortable. And I'm not talking about gameplay that is simply there, as a consequence of being a fun game. I'm talking about gameplay that you have to accomplish before you can actually get access to more gameplay. I personally enjoy repetition in hack and slash RPGs, and I play a lot of these RPGs that a lot of people consider really repetitive, but generally the games I enjoy tend to front load a fair amount of your abilities and your ability to travel, your character abilities and progression and so forth, and then scale the rest of it over the rest of the game. With Sin Slayers, I spent pretty much hours upon hours with very little in terms of actual character ability progression, just using the same set of abilities to grind fight after fight and slowly incrementing to the next level up, progressing the story, but doing very little in terms of actually earning new abilities and getting more fun out of the game. It seems as though the game has a relatively brief amount of content overall, at least in terms of abilities, plot points, and so forth. There are, after all, only 7 areas, but it dilutes that content with a relatively samey combat to stretch the playtime. The fact that unlocking higher tiers of skills requires not leveling up per se, but things that you either buy rarely from merchants, find rarely in items supposedly, or must craft, feels a lot like a sort of time sink-centric microtransaction-based thing you might see in a mobile game, except without the microtransaction bit. I almost felt like I should be able to send 50 cents to buy an item to activate one of the abilities. Sin Slayers, it seems like it has that in there all for the base price, and I don't know if it's a decent enough trade just to put busy work in there. It's otherwise a simple enough game that I'm pretty sure I'm not messing things up. I mean, that could just be me. Anyway, whether you like Sin Slayers may pretty much depend on your tolerance for tedium. And while that may seem like I'm coming down on this game and I'm being harsh about it, not as harsh as it sounds. Because on these turn-based RPGs, they tend to appeal to a particular audience, and a fair subset of that audience can handle a bit of repetitiveness, tedium, and micromanagement. Indeed, that may be the main draw of the game for them. It actually fits me in most instances. I could see myself enjoying this game. In fact, while it did definitely drag on for me during my time for this review, I am definitely seeing myself picking this game up in the future from time to time and playing an hour or two there, an hour or two here, just slowly progressing through a game that should really realistically be about a third of the length it is, or maybe half the length. But if you're fine with that and you enjoy the gameplay, and the gameplay has a lot to say for it, then it may well be worth picking up. I would probably recommend looking for a sale or something, though. And on that note, I'm going to wrap this up here. As always, I'm going to put a link to where you can get it in the description below. For now, this has been the RPG Crawler with Indie Game Friday Sin Slayers. If you like what you've seen, remember to leave a like, comment if you got any feedback, and subscribe for more RPG content, both tabletop and computer. Until next time, take care and goodbye. And if you're still watching this far, I'd like to take a moment to thank those who have supported this channel via Patreon or direct donations throughout the years, without which this channel could not have lasted as long as it has. For those who are feeling particularly generous, you can still support my work through Patreon and now through Subscribestar as well, through the links in the description below.